Live. Wait till it
Are
says
we still in Revelation?
Oh yeah, we're still in Revelation. All right, so we're live, and I'm going to put the little thing over the screen so that I don't see myself. So I'm still on. Yeah, I'm still on. I just don't like watching myself. Yes, we are in Revelation, chapter 5. We ended in starting with the end of verse 10. So we pick up 5:11 this time. All right. And just to kind of go back, we have this these four creatures, one at each corner, and then we have this lamb that is as if it had been slaughtered, which we've identified as the Christ, and there is a scroll, and there is sort of a question about who is worthy to open the scroll, and we discover that it's the lamb that's going to be worthy to open the scroll. And that was a little bit earlier, I think. So beginning in verse 11, then I looked and I heard the voice of many angels surrounding the throne and the living creatures and the elders. They numbered myriads and myriads and thousands of thousands. So huge numbers, right? And that's one of those in people's lives, in cultures, in the back in that day, the world was so much smaller in terms of they didn't even have names for huge numbers. You know what I mean? And so they don't have, myriads and myriads, thousands of thousands. Thousands may have been the most that they had the names of. They didn't have the concept of millions or billions or gazillion, or whatever, whatever we now are because of a lot of the electronic stuff, we've got names for huge amounts of the advances in science, and they don't have that, and they don't have a conception of that many that many of whatever it is. And so that's kind of why the idea of myriads and thousands of thousands, that in a sense, that almost more than you can even imagine, right? Is kind of what they're saying there. So and it's the elders, right? The elders are what there are all of these elders. And they're all singing with a full voice, and they sing, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slaughtered to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." Right? So this is a song that these elders, this myriad of myriads and thousands of thousands that are singing with this voice.
One of the lines in the Messiah, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain."
Yeah. Well, that's a contemporary Christian song. "Worthy is the Lamb." I mean, a lot of this language you will hear in music. I mean, it's taken. You may not. It's not sung in a song that necessarily talks about Revelation. It's not necessarily about apocalyptic kind of stuff. But it's, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain." That's a line that you'll hear in a lot of music, both older music like the Messiah and contemporary Christian music. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea. So in the heavens, in the heavens would be all the heavenly creatures, right? The angels and cherubim and whatever is up in the heavens. On the earth, all the creatures of the earth. Under the earth would be Hades. That would be hell. So they're talking about, in hell. And under the sea. So we got sea creatures in here even, right? So kind of brings them all in. And all that is in them, in the sea and all that is in them, singing to the one seated on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. So all of these creatures, all basically all that exists. I mean, this is the understanding of everything that is, everything that would have the ability to sing. Now, and what's interesting, the idea of everything that is under the earth included in that. You wouldn't think of the stuff under the earth um, in a sense in hell. You wouldn't think that would be uh, that those creatures would be seen, but it says under the earth. So I think, and that's how we. Okay, so it may not be hell as in demons, but it may be at least those that have died, because there is, and especially Jewish thought is that everyone that dies. I mean, it's Sheol. It's the idea that everybody goes to the same place, and it's not there. At least at some points in Judaism, there's no concept of heaven and hell. It's just you go to Sheol. Everyone does. And so maybe that's what, that kind of, it reflects that idea that everyone that's alive, but also even those that are not alive, even those that were alive at one point and aren't now. Right. Okay. And they'll sing to the one on the throne. So the one on the throne is God, and to the Lamb, which is Christ. Right. So we get the two there, the one on the throne and the Lamb. Be blessing, honor, glory, and might forever and ever. And the four living creatures said, Amen. It seems kind of like a strange, little line to throw in there. They got to the end of the song, and then they do the amen at the end, right? But
it was so chaotic. It was kind of a respite there.
Maybe, yeah. And the elders, so this is the myriad of myriads and thousands of elders, fell down and worshipped. So it's sort of like a worship service that's going on, and they're singing, and these four creatures sort of all together. And remember, they've got really super loud voices because they've done it before and they're going to do it again. And they do the amen at the end, and then everybody falls down and worships, right? So we kind of have this worship service that's gone on, and it's sort of hit a point where we're now at a point where things are going to change. We're going to move away from that and into the scroll, because the scrolls are the seals, the scroll with the seals. And so now like I say, we're switching to the opening of the seals. Then I saw the Lamb, because remember, the Lamb is Christ, and he's the only one that's worthy to open the seals, to break the seals. Open one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures call out with a voice of thunder, "Come." Okay. Interesting. Mine has a little footnote behind "come," and it says "or went." How the heck could that be "went"? What creature says "went"? Come is a declarative, like come, and it's going to call forth something. Went, it's kind of a weird. That would be a weird translation.
Different tenses.
Two different, kind of wrong tense, right?
Yeah.
Wrong tense. But the voice of thunder calls and says, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. Okay, so we're now talking about horses and riders on horses. And so what are these called? There are going to be four of them. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Is what they're called. And each one is a different color, and each one is doing something different. And I don't want us to get into, well, what does the first one mean, or what is the second one? We're going to go all the way through all of the seals, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what are some different ways that these are interpreted. Because this is the part that you start getting into where there's people that say it's about things that are to come, like in our future, or it was about things that were happening at their time, or we're going to come in their future. So, but I don't want to get into that. I don't want to do it. I think if we wait and read all of it, then we can talk about it as a whole. Okay. But that being said, I do want us to talk a little bit about what each one of them is. Okay. So what this is the white horse of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay. But kind of get that out of your mind, because I think when we say they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse, then we say, oh, well, then that's talking about the apocalypse. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. That's just what people have called it, right? What is a horseman riding on a white horse? What do you think that what would you think that means? That they're riding on a white horse.
He's the deliverer. He's the
This
Messiah.
is conquest.
Okay, it's conquest, right? It says he conquers and is conquering, right? But the Messiah. What about the color white? What does the color white signify? Christ,
Purity.
good, purity, right? And so this doesn't appear to be necessarily a negative. When we get the next ones are going to be more negative. This one not so much. Okay, white, and there are some people that talk about that this is perhaps could perhaps be Christ, and what we think of as the second coming. And there is some that will say that could be that at that point is when the second coming happens. It could also, some people say that represents like the church or the gospel is the white horseman, and that it represents the idea that the gospel begins to actually conquer the world, which I mean spread throughout the world kind of thing. I don't know. Notice the rider has a bow, which is a symbol of it's a like. Is that the ice machine?
I don't know, something really got quiet.
Well, I guess maybe it was the pump. It was pumping the water. It almost sounds like the dishwasher running. Is what it sounds like to me. Anyway, but that it could it's someone that has a bow. Normally, what do you use with bows?
No.
Arrows. So probably he's got arrows as well. It doesn't say that, but we would assume that. He's got a crown given to him, so someone kingly or regal, and he's conquering, and his purpose is to conquer, right? And so whatever is the white horseman represents is going to be conquering, okay? Is going to be out there conquering, and I kind of like the idea that maybe it is the church, maybe it is the gospel, and not conquering in a violent way, but conquering as in it's actually spreading, and people are being won, if you will, for Christ, right? And I think you could say that could be the Messiah on the white horse, could be. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature call out, "Come," or also possibly went. And out came or went another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slaughter one another, and he was given a great sword. Okay, so now we have the red rider, right? The rider on the red horse. What is red? I mean, just instinctively, what does red represent? Blood. I mean, to me, that's what, when you say red, you think of blood, right? I mean, and I don't know that, I don't know that that's what they're referring to. But when you talk about takes peace from the earth, people slaughter one another, yeah, blood fits pretty well into that. And this is, now we're not talking of something that's good, right? I mean, he takes the peace, which means that war is going to come. And I think this is the horseman that is referred to as the horseman of war. He takes peace, so there's not going to be peace. There's going to be slaughter one of another, and there's this great sword that he has. I think at this point the imagery is not, yes, nowadays we don't use horses and swords, but the idea of battle and the sword. I mean, we even talk about, those who live by the sword die by the sword kind of thing. We use the sword imagery quite a bit. But war and bloodshed. Verse 5, when he opened the third seal, I heard the living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay, but do not damage the olive oil and the wine. Now, that's an interesting one. I mean, that's one that you got to kind of wrap your head around. You know, when you read that, number one, the color of the horse, right? Black. The symbol of black in this case. Death, okay, and that's what it's referred to in many cases as death. Definitely not good. I mean, if white is considered good and pure, black is bad, evil, bad, stuff. Death, right? Except that the first horse rider comes out and he's going to be conquering and he's got a bow, so he could cause death. The second one for sure. I mean, the red horseman, right? He's got a sword and people are going to slaughter each other. So there's a lot of death. This is a different kind of death, right? And when you read and you hear that he has a set of scales in his hand, when I was reading, when I started back and was studying a little bit and read this, as I first hit that, I think, oh, like justice, because we think of justice being the scales in their hand, but that's not what this is at all. I mean, that's our conception of what scales were. For these people, scales were an actual something they dealt with on a daily basis, or maybe every so often, maybe not daily, but every few days, where they would go to the store and they would buy, or go to a merchant and they would buy wheat or corn or barley or whatever it is they were going to make and eat, right? And so the scale was then the way that you determine how much something weighed and how much you had to pay for it, right? And so then we hear this voice, and again, remember, it seems to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures, but it doesn't say that it is. It just seems to be. So I don't know if not, I don't know we don't know where it comes from, but it's this voice that doesn't. It's not the writer. The writer is not saying this. It's another voice that we hear. Okay. A quart of wheat for a day's pay, 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay, but do not damage the olive oil and the wine. A day's wage, the actual word, a denarius, right? That was what it says. The translation translates it into a day's wage. But a day's wage, a quart of wheat would be about enough to feed one person for a day. So you would work one day and have enough wheat to feed one person. What if you had a family? You get a little bit more with barley, but not a lot more. And so this is referring to what? What then does this? Before we get there, so you got wheat and barley, but then it says, "Do not damage the olive oil and the wine." So what do you think that those? Why?
Mine says that there is no olive oil and wine.
There is no. Okay, and see
You get the wheat, but you don't have any way to turn it into bread or cook it.
Well, and actually, and that could be. I mean, that's a possibility. The stuff that I read says, though, is that there's an overabundance of these things. There's huge amounts of olive oil and huge amounts of wine, but you don't have the stuff you need to survive. You don't need. I mean, you need a little bit of oil to cook, but you don't need huge amounts. There's an overabundance of things that are kind of luxuries, and a lack of things that are basics, right? And at that point, what do you have that happens when that happens? You have famine, right? Starvation, right? And this is the scenario of the Black Rider and of death is not of war, but of famine. And this is talking about famine. In fact, there and whether this is referring to something that is happening in their day or today or in the future, it is a fact of history that they actually went through a famine, probably a little while before this happened in the Roman Empire. where they had trouble with not having enough grain. Had all the olive oil and all the wine you could want, didn't have the stuff you needed to eat.
This
And
is
so-
the roots of the olive and vine go deeper and would not be immediately affected by a limited drought.
Okay.
Maybe that's why
It's a possibility.
you would have it where you wouldn't have the wheat
Possible.
and barley.
We do know though that according to the thing I was reading, that the emperor ordered them to remove at least vines, the olives, and plant corn. And it was hugely unpopular. People hated it and they wouldn't do it, and so it was a problem. But because there just wasn't enough grain being produced and too much of the other stuff being produced, and so, but that's a good point. That would be why in a drought situation you might not have the wheat or the barley or the corn or whatever, but you would have. And it probably wasn't corn because they didn't even have corn. They didn't have corn the way.
That's a new.
Yeah, that's a New World thing. It's something. It must have been something else. Then I don't.
There's
Huh?
some other ancient.
Well, I don't know. There must have been some kind of
Ancient
grains that
Yeah.
would have been there, right? But and that idea, that it's and notice that if you have lots of money, guess what? You can feed yourself, right? Because you've got enough to pay a denarius or 3 or 4 or 10, whatever. Who's gonna starve? The poor, right? And so this is and the other word that's used for this is pestilence. And I don't think it's not referring to pestilence like bugs and that kind of thing. Although that could have been part of the problem with why there's not enough of these other things. There could be, when you get droughts, sometimes you get that. I was in Hennessy. I mean, that was a big grain area. I mean, wheat was huge and all this. And we went through periods where the drought was so bad that there were cracks in the ground and the ground was pulling away from sidewalks and all kind of, I mean, it was pretty bad. And when that happened, the crickets or crickets.
Locusts?
No, not
No.
grasshoppers. Grasshoppers were horrible. I mean, just horrible. Even though it's so dry, but they were horrible. So you get some of those things go together, right? But you get this is if you're think of this sort of on a worldwide level as opposed to just an individual country. You get the first horseman that could, let's say, is the gospel going throughout the world, conquering, right? The second horseman is red, and so you get conflicts, you get fighting amongst nations, within nations, civil war, other kinds of war, regional wars, all that kind of stuff. Then you get this black horseman, and you get pestilence, you get drought, famine, all of those kind of things. And actually, these sort of work together. I've read other places that the belief is that in certain areas, at least, the greatest risk of war. We think of oil. In the Middle East, they're fighting over oil and all this. There's the belief that the greatest risk of war worldwide will be over fresh water, that potable drinking water. That it's not that because of pollution, because of climate changes and all kinds of stuff, there will be that's where. So you could get the same drought that causes the famine. You can get to cause then from that same problem, you can get the conflicts that happen between countries over the lack of water. So they kind of work together. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a pale green horse.
Mine doesn't say green.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I've always heard it's called the pale horse. So I mean, whether it's green, I don't know. It's a pale. But what color would pale be? Gray, maybe.
Like a Palomino color.
No, but tan is not
Light
pale.
tan, pinky tan.
But don't you like the idea of
In my mind.
a pale green horse? That'd be kind of funky, though. You know, I mean, it's a red. We had a red horse. You know, so it's not. This is not like a.
Sorrow or chestnut, you know.
Yeah, this is not real. These are not real horses, right? These are cosmic things. So that is a pale green. I don't know. It could be a pale blue. We don't know. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, famine, and pestilence, and by the wild animals of the earth. So this pale horse, when it comes in, and its rider is Death, it's almost the at least the two before it, it's almost those kind of rolled into one, because it's death and hell, and they're going to kill with the sword, which the red horse has. They're going to kill with famine and pestilence, which is what the black horse kills with. And then you also get this wild animals of the earth that are going to come with it. You know, the rising up of wild animals of the earth. You know, it's one of those. That's one of those. It's hard to imagine because we so decimate the wild animals anymore that it's hard to imagine that wild animals would there would be that many, or that they would be able to. But I guess in places where there are still vicious wild animals, like in India and places like that, Bengal tigers will actually they'll hunt for children and stuff. So I mean, you know.
And if this is following a famine and
So yeah,
drought,
they would
it
be
would
pushed.
force them down,
Yeah,
because there would be less things for them to eat, and
That's
they
true.
would probably be forced down to where people would be.
that's very true. That's very good. Yeah, that they would the same pressures on the people that cause death would be on the animals, and would force them to begin to hunt for people as food. Now, I don't know about the fourth. It says they will be given authority over a fourth of the earth, and I don't know what. Wide. Mine says a fourth part indicates wide but not total devastation. So it's not literally they have a fourth of the earth, but there's huge areas of the earth where you will get this. You know, some areas you get the fighting. Some areas you get the drought and the pestilence. But then over this huge swath of the earth, you get both of them, or get all of it rolled into one, right? So
That would determine who got this. If it was just a fourth, there's 3/4 of the people that aren't getting anything.
you know, I mean, I would assume that it would depend on. I'm trying to think of. I mean, if we want to look at it in our terms, I mean, from our country, the idea that we are going to have pestilence to the point that we are going to have famine in our country is, I mean, it's a possibility, but it's pretty hard. We've got so much land under farming. I mean, under, what is that called? Cultivation. Thank you. That's the term I was looking for. That it would be hard to see us being in that category, right? I mean, us in Canada are probably, because of how much open land and how much farming, you're probably not going to, even if there was drought and famine in other parts of the world, there probably would be enough. Now, we wouldn't be exporting food to help anybody else, but we could be a part of the world where you have the war. I mean, we could be at war or have civil war, or any number of things. So maybe we wouldn't, but if you get into Africa, perhaps huge parts of Asia, that, I mean, think about if you're talking China and India, and if they had drought and could not produce food, how many people could die of famine in those areas simply because they're huge populations? Yeah.
They just live day to day.
Right, to great extent, yeah, yeah. And so, so maybe they would, but then you have other places, So I don't know, I don't know that we can say, well, this would be the area where this is, and all of that. I think it depend on the local conditions. But some places you're gonna, so in a sense, some places you're gonna get war and conflict. Some places you're gonna get pestilence and famine, and some places you're gonna get both of those is basically what it's saying. And it just depends on where you're at as to what you get.
But no matter what happens in your particular area, it's gonna affect the rest of the area.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in our country, if the middle part of the country couldn't produce grain and corn and that's the breadbasket of the
Mhm.
United States, if we could produce that, it's gonna affect the whole country.
Yeah, it would, but probably we yeah, that's where it comes from. But probably we produce so much excess food. We produce so much more food than we can eat in our country that we export it. And so the odds are that we would, even if there's a famine, and we have such advanced agricultural methods that they've produced wheats and things that can grow with almost no water. And I mean, it's so the odds of us getting to the point where, I mean, it could, but it would be way into a drought before we would get to a famine situation. Now, would there be bread riots or food riots, which could cause civil strife? I think we're more likely to have that kind of thing happening than people dying from famine, at least to begin with. Ultimately, maybe, but not to begin with. But other places, very much, the exact opposite is true. So, I don't know, but we're not talking about good things going on in the world, right? I mean, and now how these are going to be viewed, we'll come back to later and talk about. Okay, so now we're at the fifth seal. When he opened the fifth seal, notice what we don't have, right? We don't have a voice of a living creature yelling, "Come!" So the four horsemen have come. That part's over. We're now going on to something else. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given. Okay, so he sees, and we don't know why he didn't see before, but maybe a curtain is drawn or just it's lit up or something. We don't know why. Remember, this is a vision. But we see these souls, these people, I guess. I assume that you would see them as people. I mean, I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know how you see souls. I don't know. But they're under the altar. What does the altar symbolize?
God.
Well, but what specifically about God? What is the altar? What do you do with the altar?
Holiness?
What do you do with the altar?
Worship.
Sacrifice. You sacrifice on the altar. Okay, sacrifice. Remember, this is their belief. This is like temple Judaism kind of still belief, because John is from that. I mean, that's his background. And so the altar is where you sacrifice to the Lord. Okay, so these are souls that, in a sense, have been sacrificed to God. I mean, because they were killed, they were martyred for the gospel, for proclaiming. Notice that it is they are slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given. So word of God. What do different ones say? Avon, does yours say word of God? Avon, huh? It says word of God. Christy, what does yours say?
Word of God.
Okay. What is yours? I know Mickey. No, Mickey, yours is different. Hang on, just come back. Susan, what's yours say?
Word of God.
Word of God. Word of God. Does yours say word of God? Okay. So, but do any of you does any of them have a capitalized W?
Yes.
No.
Okay. See, I was wondering about that, because if you make it a capitalized W, what does it become? What is word of God with the capital W? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And the Word became flesh and dwelled among us. Who is the Word? Jesus, right? So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that absolute certainty that's referring to Jesus, but that would fit. I mean, and my text doesn't have it capitalized. I think yours does, because whoever did that translation, they made the decision that was referring to Jesus, and so they capitalized the word, and that makes it Jesus. Makes it real obvious that it's Jesus. I mean, I feel like in ours it's so in a sense, they've been slaughtered for Christ and for the testimony they had given. So the fact that they were spreading the gospel, they were testifying about Christ, right? So these are in a sense the first martyrs. These are the people that had lost. Stephen is under there, and he's the first, and who knows who else, but probably by this point, very likely all of the disciples are under there, because they've all been slaughtered, they've all been killed for their faith, and so that's who is under there. And they cried out with a loud voice, "Sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth?" So they're calling on God, right, who is holy and true. They're calling on him to judge and avenge their blood, so that in judging they will determine whether the people of the earth, the inhabitants of the earth, whether they are guilty of shedding the blood of the martyrs, in a sense, right? Interesting when you think they cry out in a loud voice. I don't know if you guys know this, but probably the preeminent, most important Christian organization having to do with the threat to Christianity around the world, and specifically to Christians that are being persecuted, is called Voice of the Martyrs. And Voice of the Martyrs is out of Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I don't know if you knew that, but that's where it's from. And in a sense, maybe this is where that comes. This is this sovereign Lord, holy and true. How long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth? That you hear that with the voice of the martyrs. That's who's saying that. And so maybe that's where they got their name. I don't know. But the idea that they are calling on, while I assume in their life, as they testify to Christ and love, and they testify to grace and God's love and all that. But once they're killed, they want revenge. I mean, in a sense, they want vengeance, because their blood has been shed, and they feel like that they should avenge. God should avenge, not they should. God should avenge the fact that their blood was shed by the inhabitants of the earth. Notice it doesn't say Jews, because that's a lot of times Jews get blamed because of having killed Christ, which they don't. The Romans killed Christ. But the Jews, while the Jews may have done some of the martyrdom, but the Romans did a lot as well. And so it's not any one group. It's the inhabitants of the earth. But this is where this is the first thing I can think of in here that we've read, where we get to that idea of God sitting in judgment on the people of the earth, right? That God is going to judge. And so the first judgment that we're hearing about here is judging people who are responsible for the martyrdom of Christians. And so that's the first time we're going to hear about this. They were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer. Here, take the white robe. Put your robe on. Now chill out, okay? Chill out. The white robe, the white being purity. Pretty much everybody in here is dressed in white. So I guess maybe they were if they're souls, they're not. I don't know. Anyway, but they get white robes, and they're told to wait a little while. But notice that it's not a forever. They will told to rest a little longer until the number would be complete, both of their fellow servants or slaves, and of their brothers and sisters or brothers, who would soon be killed as they themselves had been killed. Okay. Now that passage right there is referred to as the last martyr. the idea that there will come a point in time when the last Christian will be killed, and we don't know who that is or how many that is or anything else, but that there is a limited, there's a finite number of martyrs that will happen, and that when the last martyr is killed, that at that point, the number will be complete. And at that point, I would assume the implication is that when that's complete, then you get this judgment is triggered on
That's
the
the
inheritance.
end.
I don't know.
World
We'll,
as we
we'll
know
come,
it.
we'll come back. We'll come back and deal with that. I don't know.
Once is Jewish thought held that God rules the world according to a predetermined time schedule, and that the end awaits the death of a certain number of the righteous.
Okay. I question whether the Jews actually believe that. I think that's a Christian belief, but that's okay. I think that and there may be some things that they have.
Apocrypha.
Okay.
That's
Those are the books of the Bible that are between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Yeah.
it says in there.
Okay.
That's where that
So
comes from.
okay. So it could be, and that could be in that intertestamental period between the Old Testament times and the New Testament times, there could have developed that belief. And there's a lot of things that happened in that time. The Pharisees developed their idea of resurrection in that time. So there's a number of things. So it could have been based on that. That sounds a little more like what a Christian, certain Christian beliefs, but it could be based on those Jewish beliefs. Yeah. I can see that. But very much so at this point, the idea that there's going to be a judgment is that the end. I don't. We'll come back. I want us to get through all of it and before we get to that kind of question. So, when he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and there came a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree drops its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. Okay, so huge cataclysmic earthquake that hits. Okay, what is that language? Does that language sound familiar to you? It should.
First, an earthquake when Jesus died.
There is one, yeah, and some of those things actually, yeah, that it kind of simple, but this is bigger than that. This is bigger than that, right? But if you'll remember, back in the book of Acts, I'm going to go back just so that I can make sure and quote it correctly. When the disciples speak, when the Holy Spirit comes in, they're speaking in tongues, right? And the detractors, the people that don't like them, what do they accuse them of? Being drunk. And Peter says, no, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. This is what was spoken through the prophet Joel, right? The first part talks about the pouring out of the Spirit, but then it says, I will show portents in the heavens above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon to blood before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day.
Oh,
And so this is
what was that in there?
it's in Acts 2. That's 19 through 21, but that is a reference to Joel 2:31. Okay. And so this is prophesied that there's going to be, and it's called the great and glorious day of the Lord. Okay. So in my mind, with the fifth seal and these souls and the completion of the death of the last martyr, we don't know when that comes, whether that comes before this comes, you know what I'm saying? But this is referred to as what did I say? The glorious day of the Lord. And so maybe this is right after that, or I don't know. We don't know. That's what we'll get to is how does it fall together? How does it all work together? Okay. But we've got this cataclysmic event that happens, right? Earthquake. How does the sun become black as sackcloth? What are different
Burns
ways?
out. Would burn
No,
out.
actually, because if our sun burned out, we would die before we even knew it burned out. Because at the point it burns out, it would explode, and the explosion we would probably be crisp before we even realized that it exploded. I mean, that's when you're looking at those kind of things. Eclipse would be one, but the other one is like fires on the earth that you get smoke or you get soot, right? You get dust. Some people will say that this earthquake may actually be the result of an asteroid that hits the earth that would cause the same effects as an asteroid, but also it would kick up huge amounts of dust, and it would cause fires because it come in through the atmosphere and would be like on fire almost and would hit. And so you could get. I guess what I'm getting at is that we think of earthquake and we don't think about these kind of things, but it could be a volcano a huge earthquake that hits and then sets off a number of volcanoes. Who knows what's going to happen? So but these are things that could happen together. That you get an earthquake, or that you get an asteroid that hits, causes earthquakes, causes this, that, and the other. I mean, all of these are things that could happen. I mean, they're not. These are not. We think of them as being. And I'm not trying to say God doesn't cause them, but the kinds of things that it's talking about are things that we have seen similar things happen before. But if they all happen at the same time, it could be very cataclysmic. I mean, it could be hugely and if God wanted to, if you want to wipe out life on Earth, you blot out the sun, because without the sun, you got no plants growing. You get astronomically low temperatures and freezing, and there's all kinds of things that can happen from that. And so, just you could be talking into the world at that point. The sky vanished like a scroll rolling itself up. Think of kind of almost like the blind, that you pull down and you let go and it goes, like that. So the sky rolls up. I'm not sure exactly how the sky vanishes. That's an interesting.
Where does it go?
Well, and probably just means you can't see the blue skies. You can't see the clouds. It's you're in smoke. Think about. I mean, watch some of the stuff about the wildfires and people that are on the ground in those wildfires. They can't see the sky. They talk about we can't see the sky.
I can't see anything.
No, right. So it doesn't necessarily. You don't see it rolling up, but but it just goes away. This is kind of metaphorical language, right? And every mountain and island was removed from its place. So you're talking huge, geological kinds of things happening, mountains falling down, basically. When the plates move, we think of the mountains coming up, but now you got the mountains coming down, and islands. All it takes for an island to be gone is something big falls into the water, and the water level goes up, and the island's gone. I mean, that's it's not. And in fact, in Hawaii, with the volcano. They talk about they've made new island, right? That there's the volcano, the lava has made new land that they can now sell and live on. I don't know that I don't like the idea of living on lava myself. I don't know that I like that. But obviously, so very huge stuff going on. Then the kings of the earth and the magnates and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free. So now we're at a point where all these people, it's all the same. You can be the richest man in the world or the most powerful man in the world, and guess what? You're hiding in a cave with everybody else. because we're all now, it's hitting us all the same way. They hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Which is kind of strange to say, the wrath of the Lamb. You don't ever think about a lamb being a kind of creature that can have wrath, but you're going to have the wrath of the Lamb. But what it does tell you is that all the people of the earth, okay, this is now saying all the people of the earth are saying this. They all recognize now who's responsible, right? Before we haven't heard from all the people of the earth. We haven't heard people when there was wars and when there was famine and pestilence and when there's both. And even at the beginning of this, when you have some of this other, they have this huge earthquake and all that, you don't hear it. But now it's gotten so bad that they all recognize who's responsible. And so they yell and cry for the mountains and the rocks to fall on them. I mean, crush them, destroy them, hide them from the face of the one seated on the throne, which is God, and from the wrath of the Lamb. So
What they don't know is that you can't hide.
right. Yeah, they don't know that, right. But they do know who's responsible. And they know that they need to be worried, right? They know that for the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So now we have done 6, right? This is the end. This is the end of the 6th seal, and so there's almost there's an interlude. There's a period of time between the 6th and the 7th seal, and so what happens in that? We'll read about what happens in that interlude. But at the end of the 6th seal, we now have a world that has been decimated by war. Both civil war and war between nations. Peace has gone. We have a world decimated by famine and pestilence, drought, all of that. We have the world. I mean, everywhere in the world has been struck by some of those things. And then now we have this cataclysmic thing that we have something that's happened. Notice that the 5th seal. It only happens up in heaven. The 5th seal really doesn't at this point affect the earth, right? That's the one with the souls of the martyrs, right? The people on earth would have no idea that ever happened, because now they'll come to understand it later when the judgment happens. But that doesn't affect the earth. So all those things are happening, and then you get this cataclysmic earthquake, and you get the moon, turning dark, or the sun turning dark, and you get the moon turning to blood, and you get the sky being gone, rolling up, like a window shade. It vanishes, and you get mountains and islands falling down, and you get all the people of the earth, all the people that are left that haven't died, whether they are rich or poor, king and slaves, are all hiding in caves and in rocks. Right, and they are all calling, asking. They're wanting the mountains and rocks to hide them, because they know that this is the great day of the wrath of the one that sits on the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. It's time. That time has come. Okay? And so now, whether or not how all this works together, like I say, we'll come back after we get to the end of the 7th seal. But chapter 7, or at least 1 through 17, is going to be kind of an interlude between the seals, and then the 7th seal. So that would make it all of chapter 7, and then in chapter 8 we do get the breaking of the 7th seal. And so we'll talk about the seals, and then we'll go back. We're not going to go through all of it. We'll stop at the seals, and we'll go back and talk about, okay, what are different ways we can look at these, because there's different. Because the way Tim LaHaye, this is the Left Behind people, the way they would look at this is one way. There are others that look at it and look at it differently and see it. And I can't. Metzler is his. I have a book by Metzler that's about this. And
Brad Metzler?
yeah, Brad Metzler. Yeah,
It's a-
yeah.
yeah.
He has a different, you know, and there's lots of different interpretations of what these things refer to, what they mean, the order, the chronologies, and you know, and you get the millennialists and the premillennialists and the postmillennialists and all of these things, and we'll try to talk about them and make some sense out of them. Christy, you know, your thing of not understanding it and just giving up because you don't understand. I can understand that. So don't do that, because
No.
we'll try to work through it. And so I'm not, you know, I'll be honest, we may get to the end of the discussion and we don't really know what it is. I mean, we don't know what it's about, but we at least we have some ideas of what it might be about, because the only way we're going to know is when it happens. Because you know, it's to me, it's like the whole thing about when is the end of the world going to be. Well, you know, anybody that has ever forecast when the end of the world, other than people that have said it's in the future, but anybody that from today backwards, they were all wrong. And so, you know, so we won't know until it happens exactly how all this really works together. But you know, we'll get there. Okay.
On the seal, okay, each one of these seals, they're the seals on that big scroll, right?
Right.
That he's unrolling.
Yeah.
So each time it unrolls a little bit and the
It
seal is
appears- it-
broken,
yeah,
then this
and-
is what happens.
And then yeah, and it's not as if it's written on the seal.
Yeah.
It's not like this stuff are written on the scroll. It's like the seal breaks and the scroll opens a little bit, and then he says something.
Yeah.
Well, or he says something, and then somehow from somewhere we get these horsemen or whatever. We get these things happen. So I don't know. It's
I'm trying to
if
picture
this
it,
guy
that's not working.
today was writing this, we would say he is on so much drugs that it is amazing, you know. But but you know, we don't know exactly. I mean, it's not, you know, it's one of those we're not supposed to know exactly how it works. Okay, I'm going to turn this off because I do not like to do prayer stuff on, at least in this situation. Yeah.